I started consuming him like content. You shouldn't consume the people you love. Every time I finish something, something happens in some part of my life that was not supposed to be there.
How did you manage that?
I'm Chris Dancy.
Hello, innovators. I'm Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with Chris Dancy, the most connected person in the world. They are a mindful cyborg, technopagan, technologist, entrepreneur, writer, and podcaster. Thank you for coming on the Polymath Polycast.
Thank you. It's weird to see you in person after watching a couple of your shows.
Well, I'm glad that you've checked it out. It always gives you the right kind of preparation for the show.
Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator.
Innovators crave innovative products, which is exactly why the Polymath Polycast is powered by Riverside.fm.
The way I like to break the ice, which you might have seen on those interviews, is to have you share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
I was hoping you'd skip that one. No, I mean, it's hard because I literally wrote a book full of things that people don't know, but like something I've never told in public ever before.
Mm-hmm.
My mom wrote a letter to President Eisenhower's wife in the late 70s, and I spent 2 summers at the Eisenhower farm in southern Pennsylvania, surrounded by Secret Service people for a 90-year-old woman and my mother who chain smoked and laughed about things.
That's awesome. That actually sounds like a really interesting experience, and especially since you had like all the Secret Service around you, probably gives you a pretty different perspective too from a young age.
Especially as a child, and then my mother was just really resourceful, and she was, my mother's passed away now, but she she was born in the 40s, and like President Eisenhower was responsible for a big part of her childhood, and I had no idea. I mean, presidents and the kind of stuff was all new to me.
Mm-hmm.
And strangely enough, like the third summer, so like when I was 11, my father took me to DC, and I met Jimmy Carter's daughter. Her name's Amy. It was weird. My brush with government.
Yeah.
From the 70s.
Given your whole connected to everybody and everything, so to speak.
I guess you're right. I shouldn't be surprised.
In retrospect, it's surprising though, still kind of in a way.
Well, yeah, and it's like one of those random facts, like so something I love to tell people is like my relationship with Michael Jackson, and people are like, how in the world does that get? I'm like, okay, my mother, like 1982, she wrote a letter to Michael Jackson. His team answered it, and then I ended up flying around the United States in the 80s, seeing him in concert, going to the Grammys and all sorts of stuff, and you're like, but that's in my book too.
Yeah. Well, and definitely suggest people read the book, and I'll have a link in the description for that, because that's a whole crazy concept right there. Before we even get started, too, on the questions, given the way that you are connected with the world and with yourself, more importantly, how does your brain make connections?
I usually see pictures when I hear words or hear anything, an animal sound or a road noise or someone talks. I just see pictures really fast. Most of what I say, I'm talking about something I see in my head. So right now I'm answering a question. I'm using words that someone would use who was being answered a question in front of me who's not me. I don't know. Things make sense in my head. I usually have a harder time saying them out loud, but I've gotten better. I make a lot of pictures nowadays. That's kind of why I love all the things I do on the different apps I use, because they allow me to make pictures of my brain, my thoughts.
I saw the picture of you having the wires coming out of your hand. Did you design that? Yeah,
so all through the 2010s, it started in the 2000s. Mm-hmm. Every few years, I would fly someplace and do. This is so cringy. I would fly someplace and do a photo shoot, and it was like my gift to myself. Before selfies, you had to hire a photographer. So my third or fourth photo shoot was 2012 or 2013, and I did a lot of my photo shoots in Japan. Mm-hmm. And I flew a photographer to Tokyo. And I concepted all the drawings. There's another one of a bunch of papers flying around me as if they're being held up by magic. There's one of fish flying around me. Mm-hmm. And that whole series of photos was really about identifying how kind of tech and nature are kind of intermeshed, and we're kind of have a relationship with it all the time. So that particular picture with the wires coming out is called Internet. Mm-hmm. So it's wild.
Your internet concept, too, seems to be something that I think a lot of people should learn more from or learn more about. Being more connected with yourself, especially.
It happened.
Yeah.
I mean, back when I was saying the internet in 2013, no one was like, what does that even mean? You mean internet? I'm like, no, the internet. It's like you and your relationship to the things you're wearing and the things around you in your home and how that all works. And if you're not aware of how, AIs can write an email for you, if you're not aware of how Sonos or Alexa knows how to answer you, if you're not aware of what those sleep numbers mean, you really are no different than just a browser that someone else is using, someone else being the corporation of all the technology you're using. So I don't know. I've always been really hardcore on the internet and why I thought it was so important. It's kind of sad nowadays because people just are kind of meat puppets to their devices. They respond instinctively to whatever the device tells them to do without really realizing. And now with all the AI stuff, which I'm so in love with, but I'm in love with it because it's using my data. Right? I don't think anybody's using GPT like I am. I resurrected my dead mother recently using ChatGPT by putting in hundreds of her letters to me over the years and then having conversations with her. But I think people, again, they're kind of missing the point. Every single technological step we've made from, the beginnings of the internet to kind of SaaS software, cloud, and then the social net and then wearables. It's like everyone just gets so caught up by, well, what can it do to make my life easier? Not what can it do to make my life more meaningful? And I've always really struggled with, no, my life is more meaningful. The technology just amplifies that meaning.
Technology is a tool, and a lot of people keep trying to use that as a replacement for things when it's more of just an accelerant. And I didn't mean to say that, like, oh, people weren't doing the internet kind of thing. The internet is a concept you came out with a while back, obviously, so people have definitely adopted it. I was just saying more people should. I definitely agree.
There's even this whole concept of second brain that's been around for like 5 years now. And I'm just like, it makes me so frustrated when people talk about second brains. And I'm like, you're not even using like your heart. Like you're already worried about saving and cataloging everything you've ever learned online so you can get back to it quickly, but you don't know what you're going to do with it. Second brains are no different than camera rolls on phones. You'll never go back and look at it. It's such a selfish thing to talk about a second brain. Sorry, I get really frustrated with it.
Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that because I like the second brain concept, but I don't like the methodologies people use for it because I made my own, and I think you would resonate more with my version because I do incorporate the 4 pillars philosophy, which is the mind, body, spirit, and emotions, and Ikigai as well. So that way there's a lot more nuance to it, not just, just a full tech, okay, here's the background kind of thing. What am I doing with it? Am I aligning myself with my goals and where my ambitions lie?
And that's just missing from so many of the conversations, And I think that's one of the reasons, like, Notion has always made me crazy. And again, I know they follow me online with all that kind of stuff. And I don't mean to, like, malign them, but I think Notion's done themselves no favors because if you go to, like, the Notion subreddit or you follow some Notion communities, it's all about making the prettiest version of your suggested reality. It's like Instagram for productivity. It's like, that's not the way you live. So stop pretending. The good thing is, obviously you and other people are starting to talk more about this stuff. But it's almost like you have to get in some esoteric state to think about mind, body, emotions, and spirit instead of saying that's your natural state. The fact you want to become more productive and automate all this stuff is unnatural. Yeah. So, sorry.
No, you're good. Tangents are a part of the show.
Ranty.
I just want to add one more little thing too, because I actually moved from Notion to Obsidian recently because I wanted things to resurface more. I wanted to be able to have things come back up. And more importantly, I wanted to use my data, all my blog posts and articles I've collected, like blog posts I've made and articles I've collected, and train a bot on that and create this kind of pseudo proto-Jarvis so that way I could interact with my own content more. Kind of like what you were saying there with the letters, where you're using your own training data. And I still haven't gotten around to that yet, so you're ahead of me on that, obviously. But it's something people don't think about enough.
Well, like one of the first things I did with my Airtable when I started getting super esoteric with it was I created a calendar integration so that it would go back and surface old events and integrate them into my calendar. So my calendar, do you share? Can I share screen?
Yeah, you can. Should be the bottom right here.
My calendar. Let me see if I can find it. It's really kind of cool. I have a Outlook. So like when I click on this Janet Jackson thing, does it pop up and show you?
I can barely see it. I can see Love Janet Jackson.
Yeah. So it's on I know which calendar it's looking at now. Yeah. So what's really cool about this is you'll see all these things like Starlight Expresses on the 12th. These are all things from my life. So it's reaching back into the data and then resurfacing it every day in a specific calendar link I can enable. So I can see how many years ago kind of amazing things happened in my life. So I think kind of like Facebook shows you on this day.
Yeah, memories. Yeah.
Hyper-focused version of that is a calendar view. So I've got like different calendar views, like one for kind of like the love calendar, and then or that's esoterica. So yeah, it's kind of fun.
I know there's some plugins for like Obsidian for something like that to resurface old things, but you still have to go in there and enable it. There's no, And again, you had to do that with Airtable too, but it's one of those things in your calendars and enabling it to the more specific reality of what you're talking about as well.
Yeah, I mean, being able to see that it's been 3 years since you're at this concert or 7 years since you adopted the cat. I mean, I love countdowns and count ups in my data because I have a whole countdown and count up application that I use. But I think it really allows me to, one of the things I used to talk about a lot when I would do keynotes all over was this concept of perspective as a service. And this idea was like, how could you have kind of a bigger vision of your life in a single snapshot? Like I keep a whole monitor, I'm sharing it now, that just has all of those different calendar views. So this is a giant countdown and count up. So this is counting down like one fall is coming. This is counting down the count. But then I go down here at the bottom and shows you, when things have happened in the past. So I don't know. I think we don't talk enough about the movement of time through your life and how you experience it. We're just carried with it. We're like, oh my gosh, it doesn't seem possible that was that long ago. Well, if you ever say it doesn't seem possible that something was X long ago, you're living life really too wrong, right? It should be obvious that it was so long ago, like truly living in the moment would be knowing how many moments have passed.
Did you ever see those Stoic posters where it counts down how many weeks you have left in life in a way? You have one? I can't see it on the camera, but yeah.
That black one is one right there. And then these clocks right above me, this does one rotation per year. You'll see it's past 6 o'clock. It's heading toward the orange. So that's fall. So right at 6 o'clock. So by September, and this one does one per moon cycle. This whole wall is time travel. So yeah, this whole back section from the Stoic calendar to my DNA's over there. I can't move the camera, but yeah, I know the calendar you're talking about.
That's awesome. I just wanted to make sure I asked. And I mean, I see the hoverboard there for Back to the Future. You got your book. You got your clocks.
Yeah, the cover was actually signed by everybody.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Oh, wow. How did you manage that?
I'm Chris Dancy.
I mean, of course, but yes.
No, it's just, again, just one of those most connected things. It's really weird how many people reach out to me from just random parts of society in the world saying, I watched a video or read your book or saw some. It's just so odd, to be as a D-list internet celebrity for over a decade, where you're not a household name, but people who need to know find you. It's mind blowing,
I remember actually watching a video with you and Francesco, and literally 3 minutes into it, you mentioned how the original video that you did with him got you multiple emails of people reaching out.
It was crazy. I still get people from that email.
Right here. I literally watched that video with you and immediately went to your website and reached out to you. Because I was like, this person is super cool. I want to talk to them.
Yeah, it's so good. And I did another one with him about being...
You did like 4.
Yeah, neurodiverse. I did a neurodiversity thing with him that was really nice about ADHD and autism and things. So yeah, my last one I did with him was about the CareTable app, which was like my latest Airtable endeavor that's public. And yeah, he's such a decent man, and it's been so nice to watch him have a baby and get married, then have a baby, and then grow his business, and then launch Tool. I created the first version of Tool Finder for him.
Well, that's awesome. I think I saw it because I went on there as soon as I saw the link.
Yeah, it was really crazy. But I love him. He really is so deserving of any success he has.
Yes, I actually modeled. I want to get to the questions here, but I actually modeled.
I'm sorry, I'm not going.
No, you're good. I'm the one skipping past them here, but I created my own content repurposing tool site, and I'm trying to build that out as well. And kind of similar to Tool Finder, but his is more productivity based. And I kind of modeled myself off of his channel because he's very agnostic about all the tools. He just loves the tools for the sake of the tools, even though he mainly uses Notion for a while there, now Tana. And I love doing that. I have a main tool I might use, but I love that whole agnostic concept. And I try to adopt that from him because he's so cool with that. He's cool with everybody when it comes to the tools.
Yeah, I don't know how he does it. I mean, even you, there's no way I could make as much content. I wish I could make as much content as you guys could do, but I don't know. I just feel like people are so over contented today. It's like, people are like, you should write another book. You should do a podcast. And I'm like, well, I did a podcast like back before they were a thing. And like, I don't know. Dustin, I'm just getting old.
You're not old, but I will say too, you know Gary Vee.
I'm 55.
Well, you look good for 55. I saw on your website it has the countdown. I saw the numbers kind of going up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of time differences, and I mean, I'm sure you could probably pull something up on your table, but what was your mindset 5 years ago, and how have you changed since then?
Gosh, an amazing point. That's an amazing inflection point in my life. So in 2018, I got married.
Yeah.
Um, so when you're 50 and you're just getting married for the first time, if you've never been married, I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, getting married for the second time at 50 is like not a big deal, but like getting married for the first time, it messed with my mind hard. I had met someone in 2016, my husband, and we got married. We met, we dated for a year, we got engaged, and then we married a year later. We were married in Disney World.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, like literally closed the park,
Wow.
and the pictures are amazing. And a lot of what I did with the Airtable that's now kind of is because I got married. Up until 2018, my data and how I used my data and what I did with technology was really solely focused on how do I take someone from 2008, so 10 years before that, who was 320 pounds, who was, a lot of health problems, antidepressants and drugs and alcohol and just a lot of stuff, but wildly successful. I mean, at 40, I was making a lot of money working for big tech companies, everything going right that way. But, that first 10 years and really the first 5 of it was like, how do I do something to get to know myself better? That's kind of the whole most connected person. And like the thing I never said was most connected to me. What was I missing? So, 2018 was mind melting because after 2 years of being with someone and then a year of that being engaged, you then go from like, okay, I'm productive, I'm healthy, I'm sensitive, I'm kind, I'm all of these things. Now I have to do that with someone else. Okay, so now I've got to take everything that I think is important and go, is it important to this person? And that's where the whole concept of like data and values came from, because I really had to sit down with my husband when we got engaged, because I was like, okay, let's get engaged, but spend a year working on, do we share the same beliefs? We knew the first year we did, because it's easy when you first meet someone, you're in love and it's fun to kiss and hug and, have someone do it. Yeah, it's all easy. But when you get to the hard stuff, like, the sickness and death, all the things they do on vows, but like people like, I said those once. Well, no, you have to live them every day. That was the hard part. It's just like, so let's just say, and we actually sat down, we construct like, this is the things I value, these are the things you value, and what you could do to protect those values. So we made sure they were aligned. Now they can be flexible. Like there's a health incident, we can move health closer to like a priority 1 value. But it took a lot. I mean, it took a lot out of me. I hadn't had to grow so much in that 1 year between 2017 and 2018. And then getting married was hard. Even though I thought I had it all figured out and I knew technologically, we're very different. My husband's very public. He's a school teacher. He loves social media and all those types of things where I do those things, but it's more me screaming at the world than me kind of collaborating with people. I have no desire to talk to followers. I have no desire to have engagement, like, comment, and subscribe. I don't know what that even means. I mean, like, I don't know these people who are like, commenting, and subscribing. If you want to talk to me, you can call, right? So, like, I don't know. The whole kind of ecosystem is very confusing to me. But once we had it ironed out and we started getting into it and actually got where the rubber met the road in 2018, it was really like, okay, this is different. Now, when I present myself, I have to remember I'm married, right? And then it's just like, okay, when you meet someone new. So 2018 was hard. To answer your question, 2018 was really hard because it was like, do I mix our data? Does our data stay separate? Do our processes stay different? What parts do you really do? Like one really simple thing was like, I like to do reflections. I like to journal and look back and do gratitudes. And in the mornings, I always set my intentions for the day. That's not something my spouse does, right? So like where I really like tasks and due dates and things, he doesn't like those sorts of things. So it was sort of like, okay, how do I translate a calendar view for things you need to get done to something that he understands? He's very list and flat oriented, and that's enough. And then kind of meet halfway. Like just this past weekend, he had a big list of things had to go. And I said, could you put them in value order? So he went and rearranged it because one of them was he wanted a treadmill. And I was like, just put health at the top. So he put it in value, health, home. And once it was in that order, he was like, oh, this makes a lot more sense. I said, yeah. Because like you're not going to want to do all these health things like in the morning and then switch over to cleaning the house. You want to bounce around, right? So I'm sorry, I'm probably just going off on another tangent because I haven't even explained my value system.
Well, and we can definitely get into that too. Personally, I'm also curious only for my own sake, honestly, too, because like I figured down the line when I have a partner, how is my system gonna go with them? And so you sharing your experience, it'll help me personally as the host, but also there's probably someone else listening out there who's in a similar state to where I am or where you were, where like where are you gonna be with that new partner? How are you gonna mix your systems? Are you gonna mix your systems? What
I mean,
systems do they
you
have?
really need to do a whole show on that because no one talks about love productivity. Like no one talks about, the systems that run a household, right? No one really kind of focuses on like, how do you, one of the first things I did with them, I don't know, I don't know if you know this because you've done a lot of research, but I do phone palmistry where I read people's phones and tell them their future. But one of the first things I did when I met my husband, when we were dating, was like, look at his phone. Like, is this someone I'm even compatible with? Right? Like some of the craziest things I see on Reddit are people like, he hasn't texted me back, or he read my message, but he didn't respond. And it's just like, if you can't handle an unread receipt, you really shouldn't be with someone, right? There are so many technological things that you need to be, psychosocially, maybe even intimate around. Like some people like selfies, some people like nudes. I'm just being blunt, right?
Yeah.
Like you need to figure that out. Like first dates are great and everything, but like switch phones for a half an hour and use each other's phone. My husband and I switch phones every weekend. I use his for 2 days. He uses mine to stay in each other's kind of digital lives. It's so important. I hate to sound like I think we're underestimating that topic. I'll just leave it there.
I will say the phone is a very personal thing nowadays, and so by sharing it, obviously, yeah.
I got yelled at on Twitter the other day when I suggested that. Someone was very upset with me that I suggested that. It's my personal phone. I'm like, you're not ready to be in a relationship with your phone so personal you can't share it with your spouse. I'm like, well, no, it's got intimate information. I'm like, the person you're married to, should something happen to you, or is going to make life or death decisions for you. If they can unplug you and they can't see your contact list,
Yeah.
get out.
I'm also kind of in the sense of like, I'm kind of open. Like I'll unlock my phone and give it to someone that's a friend kind of thing, let alone an intimate person. And I actually wrote that down, love productivity. If anything, you can come back on. We can talk about that on a separate episode.
I have a whole keynote on it.
Okay. Well, I thought I'd seen something along those lines too, but
yeah, the keynote's called "I Love You, Block Me," because my husband and I are blocked on all social media. I can't. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't see it.
Oh wow,
yeah, because I tried when we first started dating. I tried dating him and being connected to him on social media, and I started consuming him like content. That's not. You shouldn't consume the people you love.
That's a quote-worthy line right there. So I'm gonna
cut it out and put it at the beginning.
Okay. So what is becoming a mindful cyborg?
Being a mindful cyborg is nothing more than being in collaboration with the devices and systems. I always say they're forward application systems, devices, and services. So being in concert with those things, so there's always a chance to grow and understand yourself a little bit more. All the notifications and things and all the way we silence our devices, it's kind of this all or nothing thing. A mindful cyborg is really using those moments where you are bothered, or using those moments where you are getting feedback from an app, or using those moments where you're using an application like Facebook or Instagram, and you're interacting with someone that you love, a friend or a partner or something, and saying, is this the love I want? So mindful, moment by moment awareness, non-judgmentally. Cyborg, an organism who's enhanced or restored functionality through the use of technology. So moment by moment awareness that's enhanced or restored through the use of technology. I'm Mindful Cyborg. 2013, 2014, I started the Mindful Cyborg, another podcast we did with a writer from Wired. Yeah, I just think Mindful Cyborgism is one of those things I'm so proud of what I did in that work around there, just around myself. Forget ever sharing it with anyone. But technology was beating me, Dustin. I felt so overwhelmed by the notifications and unread emails. And once I got behind the feeling of being overwhelmed, what was it about an unread email? What was it that made me need inbox zero? All of those things. So why can't I have any unread, the badges on your phone, messages, and why can't I have those? Once I got behind that and I understood, for me, it was about feeling out of control, feeling not responsive. By if someone needs to contact me and I haven't responded to them on a text message, to me that says I don't love them. Kind of like that person I said earlier who said, my partner hasn't, he read my message but didn't respond yet. So my really close friends and the people that are in my life at a very intimate level, beyond my spouse, I don't have any digital relationships with them because I can't do it. I can't. It's not fair to them. I'm sure they can handle it. I can't. That's a mindful cyborg.
Again, the mindfulness aspect, you took the time to understand yourself more and understanding too where some of your mindsets might come from. What you said really resonated with me because what happened when I was really young, I was like 17. My mom had always been very like communicative. She would always text, she'd always expect responses. And so I got into this kind of mindset when I texted people that I had to always respond. And so whether it was friends or family or even strangers, people I barely knew that I somehow had their number or something like that, we were talking, I would always respond. Like I would always have to make a response, whether it was something simple or not. And I remember getting a text. I was with a friend. My friend was very introverted. He definitely had a complete opposite philosophy to me when it came to communication. But it was interesting how I kept getting texts from my mom that day. And, as a teenager, you don't always want to have texts from your parents. And she was being really overbearing. I was like, I don't want to keep responding to this. I don't want to respond. But I felt like I had to. And he just straight up tells me, well, then don't.
Yeah.
And my mind just could not process that kind of just philosophy, despite the fact it was so simple. And I mean, I did it. And from then on, I realized too that responses aren't necessary for everybody. And sometimes you could choose when to not do it, and also to have empathy for the other person. Maybe that other person's really busy. They have something going on. You don't have to have a response from that person.
Well, and again, I struggle with that. I'm more like you. And I don't think that people need a response. I think it's a sign of respect.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me. That's just how I think. I understand now hearing about your mom where that feedback loop was important to her. That's how she knows she was heard. I don't know if she thought whether she was understood, but that's a whole other thing. It's hard, especially nowadays. I have people in my life, a guy I know named Ben, who's very big in the Airtable community. He does not respond to things. And I've had to really, I'm going to say some controversial stuff, so brace yourself. I've had to really almost make people stupid. I've like, this person is emotionally stupid to think that it's not important to at least acknowledge you got that email, that message. Just because to me, the basic form of communication is just acknowledgement. And I don't think acknowledgement should end because you have an interface, whether that's an inbox or a chat message or social media. Now, if you're there because, and you need, again, let's be the mindful part. If you need that interaction, then don't be there with those people. So, the other thing is I have a lot of friends that force me into interfaces for acknowledgement that they want. Ben will not talk on the phone. He will FaceTime me. Well, sometimes I'm naked or in the shower, or sometimes I'm in bed and I don't want to FaceTime. I have another friend who's on WhatsApp. She will only WhatsApp audio me. Like she won't type messages. She won't do any other WhatsApp ways. But she, the voice message you can do on iPhone too. And I hate that because it's just like, I feel like I hate being forced through other people's systems to make them feel good when they don't have respect or even ask me how I want to be communicated to. Like, do you have a preference for how you communicate with people? And I always say, yes, I do. But I understand it might not be for you, but call. Well, what happens if you're not busy? I'm like, you know what we did before
voicemail.
And how many people don't have voicemail set up or they're full?
Yeah.
And it's just bizarre. And I think the fact we don't even ask that, you would never behave that way IRL. You would never walk up and just say to someone, here's a tin can. If you're going to speak to me while we're standing here, talk through the tin. You wouldn't do it.
Yeah. Well, and there's multiple methods of communication. As you said, there's the voice messages. I don't have iPhone. I use Android myself. I've always been an Android guy. And so I can't do FaceTime, but I can do the Google Meets or whatever for other Android people. I love how Instagram, which WhatsApp's pretty similar to that, the chatting on Instagram is really nice. You could do text, you could do video, you could do voice chat if you wanted. And I honestly, a lot of the time, I do the voice message. But I also realize that some people are in the train. They can't hear the messages. So I'll retype out what I said in the voice message just to cater to them because I have respect for their time and location and what they're doing.
And again, the fact you take time to type it out, right? It's about accessibility, It's like I've been yelled at so many times on social media if I don't alt an image. It's like, you're not thinking about all the people who are blind. I'm like, you're right, I'm not. Because it's hard for me to think about everything everywhere all at once. It's so hard to be a mindful cyborg. Because with that level of mindfulness, you realize you could spend 10 hours doing one thing so that everybody gets it equally.
Mm-hmm. And before we move on to the next question, too, I will just add, like, my main series, I make as a video, a blog post, and a podcast, so that way I could cater to different viewing types. Even this show is a video. It's also it's audio.
But I made a video. To your point, I made a video just recently where I made 4 versions of it. A short version, so a time version, short, long, and and then another version that was just key points. Yeah, if you go to themindfulcyborg.com, I've got some videos there that are all the same thing, but they're literally shot from different points of view.
Well, and the link will be in the description for people.
Oh yeah, it did. You don't have to. I was just saying. I totally get what you mean by you try to like have that 360 view of how someone might consume. Like that can cripple you. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, all the ways I have to make sure someone can find this. And it's like, okay, and that's when I just started to just do stuff for me.
I don't expect everybody to create content like that. I personally like all three mediums. I love being on camera. I've gotten used to being on camera. It took me a while, but now that I am, I like doing it. I've always been a writer, and podcasting is kind of easy. You just cut out the audio for the most part. And so it's just one of those things where I can do it, but not everyone will. And one thing you mentioned too is the values. And could you touch on that a little bit for us?
So when I was building my Airtable system, I had to really think about, obviously, my family. You know, it's like that's going to be like the key driver for everything that is going to link. You know, for your users who don't know what Airtable is, just a relational database. But like once I got beyond like the key driver, like okay, like we are the first record in the the system, like my family is. Like, what would be second? And for me, when I was really thinking about this, it had to come from this place of if you're ordering kind of how you connect to the world around you, but you needed a filter for your time, right? So how do you make decisions? Like this is something we'd ask anyone, like, how do you make a decision? Like, I feel like doing it, or it needs to be done. And like, that's a pretty rudimentary way to make a moment-by-moment decision if you're living mindfully, right? More often than not, what we're doing when we're making decisions about our time, or like for you and me, when I agreed to do this meeting and I'm like, okay, how do I schedule this? You know, this is about service work. It's about, I don't know you, you're not paying me for this. So it's like, how do I, well, this has to be aligned to one of my values. So when my husband and I sat down, we talked about this, we thought, well, how are we going to decide what we spend money on? How are we going to decide that what things are important that we both want to do? And how are we going to decide like what people stay in our lives and what companies we do business with? And I just said, how about if we use like our values? And he goes, what do you mean? I'm like, like health is really important to me. So we should spend money on things that are healthy. And kind of like, gym membership. I'm like, and I had to back people away from this traditional way of like categorizing things, like kind of budget you would use, all these sort of things. And just say, no, at a very root system. So we developed that system to do that. And the value system ended up becoming just in 2018, just became instrumental to me when I was thinking about, I would go on design a lot of other systems since 2018, systems for big companies and just the coolest stuff. I mean, I'm just so proud of like some of the stuff I've gotten to do over the years. And it's always value driven. Like everything, whether it's a company or a community, and you're building a system, when they have values, so the value system was really about, okay, we know who we are as a family, me, my spouse, our pets, my business, but like, how do we link? So what are we linked to? And the first thing was this kind of value set. And the value set was really about, well, if there are going to be values, how do they live? So there were really three types of values. There were personal centered values that are kind of maybe important to you, Dustin, or your friend. They'd be growth centered, so things that are more like that's how you're evolving as a person. And then the last set of kind of value types would be legacy centered. So those are like, what can you show for what you did with your time, either today or once you're gone? And these values then had to have kind of definitive areas or matrices within your life. So what are they? What do they mean? So for health, mental, spiritual, emotional, but really like what are the actions you're willing to do to make sure you maintain that value? So for my husband, it's journaling, meditating, that's other. For me, it's really important to allow other people to speak their minds so I can learn to watch my own. And then, what are kind of the guardrails? So what you can do to manage and maintain those values? Once we had those, if you're creating a task, like no matter what it is, mow the lawn or whatever, it should tie to a value. Or else like, why are you doing that task? And again, it's about moving your mindset back to the technology and however you're organizing your life, but having a purpose behind it. I can't tell you how long I spent prioritizing things. Like it's the priority one, or so many other ways of like keeping track of what needed to be done or what was important to me. Like journaling was separate, but no, journaling is a function of a value I have around health. It will be a family legacy thing when I'm dead because, I've got a lot of data and like you can do that sort of thing. So does that make sense the way I'm explaining kind of values, the way I do it? Okay.
Well, and I very much appreciate you explaining it that way. I also appreciate you coming on the show. I know I'm not paying you, so thank you for your time.
I didn't, I wasn't dropping that. But it's hard sometimes when I'm doing an interview and I explain service of values, and I'm like, well, how did I show up? Everyone always wants to know how they're showing up in my life.
Time is money, but also you this gives you a chance to be out there in the world in a different manner. And I try to exemplify your polymathic traits, so hopefully you get a unique experience from that, and perhaps
Yeah.
that could be a value prop.
Yeah. But you understand what I mean? Like, for you, if you were using my value set, the health, home, family, work, financial, or service, what is this for you? Are you creating content as a service for our community? Are you creating it to build a brand? You know what I mean? Is it work for you? Do you understand what I mean? Like, how I want, like, if you were to literally become me for a second, how would you categorize this time together?
I would categorize it partially. I don't make this show for the money. Like if I do sponsorships, it would just be on an additional kind of thing. It's not the goal for this show. The goal for this show is to exemplify polymathic traits, not only for you as the guest, because there's some people who come on the show who don't realize they have these.
Service.
Yeah.
So it's service. You're doing it for others. And I think that's really important. I mean, we don't often talk about why we do the things we do.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can phrase it around a value, it kind of takes all the ugliness out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's a really provocative way to live. And I wish more people talked about values first, because so often they get in trouble because they just see people just do things but don't know why.
Well, it also helps other people too. One thing I have noticed that there is this kind of relation to a lot of neurodivergent people and this multi-potentialite or multidisciplinary lifestyle. And by seeing other people who are more successful along the lines of who might have the same neurodivergent traits, that kind of thing, it allows them to kind of have that kind of person they can work towards. Okay, this is a model mental model I can model myself after. And
Yeah.
on top of that too, you're the first person I've seen to really exemplify that mind, body, spirit, and emotions mindset as well. Because I talk about it, but I feel like you and I are some of the only people who do. There's August Bradley who talks about pipes, pillars, and vaults, and he has that kind of philosophy, but he's way more technical about it. And then there's obviously Francesco and his style and things, and we talked about Second Brain earlier too.
It's taken him a while to get there.
Yeah, but I have noticed that over the years.
I have pushed him hard to do more of that, because when he had his first child, he's about to have a second. I said to him, you need to start talking about what it was like. And his name's Otto. What it's like for Otto to be in your life and how you're integrating into your productivity, or else you're just people don't want tools, they want life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just like, I don't know. Sorry to even cut you off, but
no, I think I was done anyways. And the cool thing about the show is the synergy of ideas, and when you get excited about something based off of what I said, or vice versa, and the tangents we can come out of that. So you mentioned that the AI you built around your mother, and I also wanted to ask, how did your mother inspire your diary keeping too?
I have actually my first TED Talk in Vienna, Austria. Actually, she wasn't supposed to be in it. She became the crux of the talk. Mm-hmm. It's funny because this interview started talking about my mother. Mm-hmm. So yeah, my mother was a copious note taker and a copious record keeper and list maker. So I was born in 1968. My mother... So by the time 1973 was kind of my earliest memories, I was 4 or 5. My mother just making lists at the kitchen counter, and on paper and pen, and crossing out the things she got done. She'd stop, smoke a cigarette like you did in the 70s, and drink her coffee and do stuff on her list. By the time I was 6 or 7, my mother was. I would see my mother doing things with her calendar. It wasn't just lists. She'd like every a few times a year she'd get our calendar and update like everybody's birthdays. There was no automatic copying of stuff. And then my mother would write volumes of letters. So she wrote you a card. It would have a 10-page paper hand cursive letter in it. My mother by nature was a record keeper. She was a note taker. She was high productivity before there were any real tools or systems. And being exposed to that at a very early age, it just seemed natural to me. So like when I went to school, I was very much a rule follower and understand all those things. Moved now until the late part of my 20s, early part of my 30s, my life had really fallen apart. And, in 2008, when I turned 40, I decided to pull it together. But about 10 years before that, right after my mother, and I reached out to my mother and I said, I'm feeling very suicidal. I'm having a lot of really difficult thoughts. I was in my early 30s at this point, and I was just said to her, I said, is there any advice you can give me? Because I feel like I don't know who I am anymore. And she said, Christopher, sorry, I always want to do her voice. Christopher! She was like a smoker. She'd talk to me on the phone. She goes, I can help you out. But you gotta tell me you're going to be okay. And you got to give me about a month. I'm like, that's fine. Whatever you need, Mom. She called me up like every day. We didn't live together. And a month goes by, and then all these boxes start arriving at the house. And yeah, Christopher, I heard the boxes are there. I'm like, yeah, and I'm not supposed to open. She goes, you got to wait till Christmas morning. I'm going to open them up with you. And I said, okay. Christmas morning comes. It's 2003, 2002, and she's got me on speakerphone. I'm talking. She goes, okay, open up box one. You sure it's box one? I'm like, yeah, Mom, it's box one. She goes, okay, open up. And you see the book inside? I said, yeah. She goes, lift the book out. She goes, Christopher, don't open the book. I'm not opening the book. I'm going slow, Mom. She goes, I want you to do something. I said, what? She goes, I know I had to work a lot when you and your brother were growing up, and I know I couldn't always be there. She worked like 3 jobs. Like my father couldn't hold a job, so she was always working, so we wouldn't be homeless. And we still were homeless twice. But she goes, I want you to know I kept track of everything, and I know you've been having some trouble lately, but you're a good person. Sorry, I'm going to get emotional.
It's okay.
She said, you're a good person, Christopher, and I want you to know that when you forget, I remembered for you. And she would open up book one, and I opened it up, and it said February, I can't remember the date right now, 3rd or 4th or something, 1967 or 1968. Dear Christopher, I found out today you're coming. And she'd started writing me letters when she found out she was pregnant. And she kept writing me letters and saving report cards and hair clippings and like the most elaborate stuff, the label of the first baby food I ever ate. The first McDonald's receipt, the first time I ever had French fries, in 1972. I'm like, this was your first French fries. You love French fries. You only eat the ends. And the notes she would put on these things. And it blew me away. I had no idea you could love so hard. You could send it through the future.
Yeah.
It melted my brain. And I spent, and I had been a big note. I was just like her. I was calendars and notes and diaries and all those things all through the 80s and 90s as a teenager and into my 20s. And I had never really considered who I was doing it for. She had known from day one who it was for. And that's when I spent time going back and really, it took me a long time, Dustin, to open up all of those books. I'm not going to lie, I couldn't get through the first page. I lost it. I was broken till well into the new year that year. Meaning middle of January. To this day, and she died 6 months later.
Oh wow!
Yeah, her cancer had come back when I was 14 in high school. I took her back and forth to chemotherapy. I didn't have a driver's license, so it was a whole other ordeal. It's like she just expected me to drive.
Yeah.
It was kind of crazy, but it was the early 80s or whatever, and so her cancer had come back, and she didn't want to put the family through chemo and radiation and all that. So she just let it grow and grow and grow in her chest. The doctor kept telling her to come back. She literally had the phone changed at her house, or my father would know that someone was calling. The doctor couldn't get a hold of her. And it just grew to a mass. And then one day she was going to have some tests. And I was going to actually fly down to see her because I didn't want her to go have tests alone. I didn't know why she was having tests. And I was at the airport. I got a phone call that she'd passed away waiting to see the doctor. So I ended up flying to the funeral. So I don't know. I would hope that maybe, I know she was trying to protect us, but I love romanticizing the idea that she knew that something might happen to her, and she knew I was going through a tough time, and that she had to pull the plug on, this is your life, and send me all of that information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it seems like her mindset was preparing you for the future version of you that she could...
Without her.
Yeah.
Without
Especially
her.
if she was a chain smoker, too. I mean, a lot of smokers do know that, like, okay, it's going to lead to something down the line. I resonate too. My mom had cancer around the age of when I was about 14, and so I get that, being that kind of young and susceptible at that time too.
Oh, it was terrible because she coming home, because I had to drive home. She could drive there. Coming home, she was sick. So I'd have to pull over so she could throw up and stuff, and it was so hard. I mean, you had a mother who went through this, and then she had to have a radical mastectomy and have the lymph nodes taken out, and it was. Yeah, it was a lot. That being said, it taught me a lot of valuable lessons about love and technology. I mean, paper, pen, calendars, it's all technology. But it took me a while. I mean, all this happened in 2002, and I didn't pull it together until 2008. I mean, it took me... I moved my father in with me right away because he'd never even cooked for himself. He'd never cleaned a bedroom, much less, like, once she was dead, I thought he'll be dead within a week. They said he wouldn't even know what to do.
Yeah.
So I took care of him for 2 or 3 years before I sent him back. And then, I was doing really well at work, but like I said, 2008 came, and I went to look up something in my internet history, and I saw like my entire life flash before my eyes. I'm like, oh my God, I've done all these things over the last week on the internet. And I thought, why don't I know this? And that's when I built System One. And System One was anything I touched digitally wrote to my Google Calendar, like hundreds of slices of data throughout the day. And then I could search it and query it. And 4 years later, somebody saw it running, and then the rest is history.
History. I definitely would suggest people watching or listening in to go check out some of the links in the description, because a lot of them show those early versions on the calendar and just how expensive they could be. And when it comes to your history, it's interesting too to think about how those 4 pillars, the mind, the body, spirit, and emotion, I often find that people identify with one. They kind of have that main anchor pillar they kind of build themselves up with. For me, it was the body. I grew up in a recreation center. I did swimming. I did lifeguarding. The body was where I was able to build myself and understand myself. But there's other people who learned through books and through this learning, so their mind was more so. I think that's kind of how you were too, where you're probably more mind. That's what I'm assuming, at least. You're more mind-centered. And when that happened, it struck down your emotions pillar, and you had to rebuild that back up, and you were this much stronger because of that.
Yeah, it's really weird. I never really thought about the way you're phrasing it. So I was a very heavy child, and my father was very abusive physically, and he would also be verbally, like telling me I was a fat child and all this other kind of stuff, which is hard to hear from a parent. And I struggled with reading. I still, I don't know. I say things that aren't on the page. That being said, if I could go back in time now and like revisit all that, I really feel like I'm more spirit centered. Like even as a young child, I was very attracted to religion, ritual, what type, and even in my book, I don't mean, my book hasn't been out for years. So I don't mean, I'm not referencing it to people to get it. And by the way, if anyone writes to me, I'll just send you a copy. But even as like a child in the late 70s, like, 8, 9 years old, I would spend time in the self-help section. Again, the only damn child in that section. So for me, like, I definitely think I'm more like spirit first and then mind second. Body, I still don't have a relationship with. I've said this in a few interviews, but I haven't actually looked in a mirror since 2014 or 2015. I would have, I'm afraid to. I still cannot. I don't understand what I'm supposed to see. So it's easier for me to disassociate with my self identity and be me than have a self that I have to force into that shell. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Body dysmorphia is definitely a big deal too. I faced a part of it myself, so I empathize. Probably not to the same degree, but I definitely have experienced it.
Yeah, because I don't want to be this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know what you mean totally by dysmorphia. Like I still look at guys around me and look at their jean size. I'm like, oh my God, I'm that size, because I don't feel that size. But it's terrorizing to see my shell.
I grew up really scrawny and weak and picked on because of that. And so growing up being more muscular, I definitely still see that skinnier person in the mirror. And I have to face that. And I know mentally that I'm not, and that helps me get past it. But it's definitely taken a lot of effort to do that. And when you were talking earlier, I definitely got the sense of the spirit pillar too. I made the assumption that it was emotions, but that's probably because it's just built up so much at this point. Now that I've seen who you are now, that's what I pictured.
Yeah,
the spirit makes big sense.
I think the emotions, the fact you honed in on is super important, because again, my emotions, for better or for worse, through so many different life experiences, cancer and homelessness and all these other things, and drugs and alcohol and D-list internet celebrity and, all this, the emotions are the only thing that really kept me alive. At the end of the day, if you can't have your feelings, you don't really have much of a life. And that's the hardest part, I think, today about being married to my husband and having friends, is we just don't talk to people about having emotions. We just do not say, what does that mean? Earlier someone put on Twitter, when someone says to me they're processing emotions, like, what am I supposed to do with that? What does that even mean? Does that mean you're taking a minute to think about how you feel? And like, I literally quote tweeted and I said, no, processing emotions means I'm considering whether I want to ruin something in me or you right now. Because if you don't process them, you will ruin it.
Yeah.
All emotions, good, bad, angry, sad. If you don't take a moment to process it and you give someone the raw version, you'll ruin you or them every single time. But no one wants to talk about raw emotions or emotions in general. So yeah, it's a thing.
So
I'll just leave it there. It's a thing. So,
I want to go back to the 4 pillars a little bit, because again, we have our anchor pillars. Like, so yours was spirit, mine was body, and then we kind of find our next one. So your next one probably was, just in a transition thought. Okay, emotions. Mine was mind. Other people might start from mind and go to body because there's that strong connection there. But what I really want to highlight is the web in between them. When you build up one pillar, it does help build up the other ones. But when one pillar gets torn down, it also does the reverse too. And a lot of people don't see it as that 3D kind of thing where these pillars are all connected and they all do build up and they're all important. You don't want to ignore one or the other, but it's hard sometimes because you only have so much time in your days in your life, and picking which one to work on in that day, that week, that month, that year. It's a hard challenge. Again, understanding your values and understanding where you want to go is important.
Yes, I love that you right there with the values. Because again, once you have values, feelings don't matter. Because if someone messes with a value, your feeling is actually makes sense to them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you start with a feeling, that doesn't make sense. Where did that come from?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it's so backwards with some people. It's funny. My husband and I have this thing I've showed on. I think I've showed this on Keep Productive. But once a week, we sit down to go over kind of our values. And this is the screen for it. I'll try to zoom in. But what we do is we have our values, the ones from Airtable, and we have these sticky notes. And then we take a sticky note and we put it over here to things from last week, so looking back, reflections, or feeling forward, intentions for the next week. But while we're doing it, we have like kind of charts for feelings. So we can talk about, because my husband's an unnatural communicator of feelings. So like having these charts to kind of help them understand where feelings intersect and what they mean. So I love this one from Inside Out, sadness and disgust, self-loathing. So if you can identify at least one, we usually can get across where we are. And then if a value's kind of needs to change, it's not good, then it really helps to kind of drill into where we need to be focusing to have the talk about the important part. So to me, feelings and values are really kind of linked together because feelings are nothing more than your values being triggered, good or bad.
And I've always kind of seen like the four pillars being like the mind, body, and spirit, and then the emotions being kind of the connective tissue between them.
Yeah.
I've always
I said earlier, to your point, I literally said that earlier. So my feelings were the one that kind of made me get through all before.
Yeah.
And I'm not familiar with the four pillars. Is this a book or something?
It's something I created with, actually, based off of ancient philosophies. Obviously, some people came out before me. I mean, yoga has the 4 areas. There's Aristotle tenets too that are similar. I just tried to modernize it in this way. So thank you.
I like it. It makes a lot of sense. And what are they again? They're mind, body, spirit,
and emotions.
Yeah.
And then I kind of throw ikigai in there too, because you have financial on your charts, and that financial for me is kind of like the ikigai.
I really needed the financial because I'm very into like symmetry, and like having 2 of the personal and 2 of the growth. I had to have 2 of the legacy. And like service makes sense for legacy, but like what empowers service? So you like, again, if you go back and look at those values again, like each one empowers. I can't really have home if you don't have health. I don't know. So yeah, financial is hard one for me to be on there, but some things have to be financially motivated because like I'm having been homeless a few times in my life. It's just like, you need to worry about something, money sometimes.
I definitely align with that. Like, I've never been motivated by money, but I also know that like not having money sucks because then you can't do things.
You really can't. It is what it is.
So I wouldn't call you a life hacker, more like a life data orchestrator. What sort of definitive title do you most prefer?
Oh my gosh. I'll tell you what I used to love, because I don't know what I'd call myself now. I used to call myself a data exhaust cartographer.
Okay.
And that was just, there's a really simple way I make maps for companies, for people, to people's data exhaust. So like anything, to me, data lives in 3 spheres, something called soft data, and that's data that you construct, that you kind of have a hand in creating. You can manipulate that. Hard data, that's data you really don't have so much of a hand in constructing. So like a soft data would be a Facebook post or listening to a specific song because you chose the song. Hard data would be something that you have a hand in, but not directly. So your blood pressure, your respiration, the loudness of that song is hard data. Core data is stuff that you have no control over, but ultimately through hard and soft you can manipulate. So epigenetics, so your genetics, your microbiome, blood results, things that can be influenced through the orchestration of soft data and hard data. So I love looking at data through that lens. And I have a whole data stack of place, behavior, activity that I've also did. I first started at MIT in 2014. But So I take these two kind of methodologies of thinking about data, and I think about my life, and I think I'm a data map maker or a cartographer. I really like MindfulCyborg. I think it's a really fun thing, but again, it doesn't make sense. People understand life hacker. It's like ugh. But I don't think I'm hacking my life. I think my life is hacking me. But I don't know. Today,
Something that came to mind earlier was value hacker.
yeah, I like value hacker again, but even that's people struggle when I say values. What do you mean values? I'm like, there's this whole thing again on Twitter just the other day where I can't remember which star, Jonah Hill or something, had something trending where his girlfriend shared some text message from him about the things that she didn't like about some of his behavior, and people were losing their minds saying she had boundaries. I'm like, no, she has values. Those aren't boundaries. She's saying when you pose with half naked women that it makes her feel less than. Those are boundaries. I mean, those are values. So, yeah, I like value hacker. I love Cyborg, but that's another one. No one understands it. So it's like just Cyborg. Like, okay, I'm a really good Cyborg. I'm probably the best.
I definitely agree. Most connected person. And it kind of reminds me of that book, Super Connector, but you're more of a hyper connector.
Yeah. And I totally, I mean, there's a whole concept of connectors too. I don't know if that's the book you're talking about, but some people like know everybody. It's like they're really good, super kind of like, I should destination introduce you to this person. I don't have that skill. If someone needs that, I can Rolodex them into a good relationship, but that's not where I am. I'm really good, and I think it's why I do the phone palm reading. I'm really good at looking people's technical lives and telling them kind of what's going on, and it blows people's minds.
We'll have to do something like that another day too, or you just look through over the system and just read the palm of my system.
Yeah, well, send me your home screen when it's over, and I'll do a free reading for you and send it back.
Awesome, thank you. From balancing all this vast data, hard and soft, working many different fields of tech over the years, like you said, like tons of different places, and creating a variety of content, because like you said, many podcasts. How do you manage your time? Obviously, we have the whole Airtable thing, but how do you view it and how do you play with it?
So again, values make the decisions of the time, but the time itself is structured in, I think the people call it time blocking. I don't know, but am I saying, is it time blocking a thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I time block. I have on the calendar I showed you earlier with kind of with the countdown next to it, I time block, but time blocking is like a calendar. So, and then I lay the other calendar over it with how the time was actually spent to get the differential. But as I've aged, if I'm just being honest, a lot of times I have to take that into account because I go to bed early. I'm in bed by 8, which is like outrageous for some people, but I'm up early. I'm up at 5. So, just making sure that I take time. It's been a really hard lesson the last 3 years of the pandemic about making sure I rest. I thought I was really good at deliberate rest, getting in bed early, getting the proper sleep, making sure I'm ready to sleep, with all the things you need to do and not do. But I had never really rested. I was sleep hacking. I was never rest hacking. And rest is so fundamentally important for me. I even saw this article the other day where kids are calling it bed rotting. And that's where sometimes they just stay in bed all day. And like people were losing their mind, like, what's wrong with this generation of young people in their 20s and their teens who are bed rotting? I'm like, I think they've prioritized rest.
Yeah.
So, now when I have time, I how do I spend my time? Time blocking really helps, but a lot of it is just making sure that I'm focusing on where I am. Again, my values. I almost said pillars. My value pillars. Do I need to do this? The hardest thing is I have to make time to help people. It's just who I am. It's what I value, that service component. So I'd spend so much of my time, my waking time, I could be with my spouse or with myself or doing some passion project, helping freaking strangers, building system. I'm building one for our library right now. I'm building another one for another health department. I'm building another one for a long COVID community in Australia, and these are hundreds of hours, but I don't know. I feel like I have such a unique skill and gift that if I don't do it, who is? It's kind of like crazy, but I feel like I have to do it.
That's why I do a lot of the stuff I do. So I definitely resonate with that. I feel that it's one of those things where if you feel like you don't do it, you just kind of feel like you're wasting your time, and it's frustrating too, because especially since you want to keep working even though you need to rest, but if you don't. Play hard, work hard mentality, right? You have to be able to play hard and relax hard, rest hard too.
And it's weird. There's almost like a math that the universe keeps that, like, I never do things to get something back because I've never got anything back from any things I've done. But I can tell you this: every time I finish something, something happens in some part of my life that was not supposed to be there. So, like, the universe really super reciprocates, and never reciprocates to the person or the entity or the job you're doing. But the minute that is done, as far as the universe is concerned, and I have data for this too, I have a serendipity engine I wrote. There is a instant return on that investment, and I always tell people I can't promise you when, but it'll work. And the minute you stop looking for it to work, it works faster.
Serendipity is a really important concept. I was actually thinking of synchronicity, and Steve Jobs says like you can't connect the dots looking forward, only by looking back. But I think synchronicity is you kind of looking at the future and connecting the dots ahead of time, sowing the seeds for those dots connections.
Yeah, so one of the first apps I ever built for a major company, we had a synchronicity engine in it. And I created a mapping system to actually put data in time to create synchronicity for a person. And so my model was basically things happen now, and that's what most people are experiencing. And this all falls under the moniker of nonlinear time. And then the first kind of instance that you'll notice is when you're tapping into it is deja vu. So you yourself, on your own awareness of the moment, might feel like you've done something before. That's usually a sign that you have the ability to experience something more. And that's usually if you want to hone it, almost like exercise, and you want to play more with deja vu when it happens, which is a combination of disassociation and memory. But then after that, you kind of get into this coincidence. And like coincidence is deja vu that happens between you and an environment or a circumstance, which is different than deja vu, which is just kind of unembodied you. But then you get into serendipity, which is coincidence plus you and someone in an environment. So, oh, two of you just happen to be somewhere, and then you get into synchronicity, which to your point earlier about looking backward, and that's everything. I hate to keep saying this, but kind of like the movie, it's like everything, everywhere, all at once, making sense.
Yeah.
And if you can then see your life through those things, you can actually create it. So a lot of that biohacking I did early with my Google Calendar, losing weight and stopping smoking and stopping drinking and drugs and all those other types of things, was by orchestrating synchronicity, where I thought, well, that's magic. How did I just know to not do that? It was pretty easy Zapier automation at that point to make that come back to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it also kind of makes me think too about like the polymathic lifestyle, is that by being multidisciplinary, doing many more things, you open yourself to more opportunities, and doing so and engaging more chances to get into serendipity and synchronicity down the line.
Yeah. I like that I just give it chances. Yeah, you got to give it chances. You got to have room for it.
So one thing I like to ask all of my guests is, what is a polymath to you?
Gosh, I don't even think I could answer that. I really thought about, because you were nice enough to send over the things you wanted to talk about. And I thought about like, okay, I'll just rattle off something. But if I'm being true to myself, when I originally saw that question, I thought to myself, I don't have an answer. I think polymath needs to live in its own world within each of our minds. I mean, you can take a rote definition or your definition or something you might find online, but I think polymath at its highest level needs to be whatever it presents itself as to you.
And that's actually
if you're truly a polymath.
Yeah. Plus, it's definitely, you have to be open minded. You have to be curious. You have to have an open mind. You have to have that exploratory mindset. And I love asking that question to different people, because like you just did, you give your own answer. It's what is it to you, and then that's kind of your mental model as well, to kind of for people to also base themselves off of. Here, I'll take a little bit of this from this person, a little bit from that person.
I don't consider myself a polymath in the traditional sense of the way that you explain it when you talk about it, but I understand the need for having a model around models. It's very meta. Yeah. When I saw that question, I can't remember how your list was. I was like, oh gosh, here we go. I think if I did not put that, I would have not pulled out the nonlinear time engine. I think that was I don't pull that out for a lot of people.
That's honestly too why I send the questions ahead of time, so that way you can kind of think about what you might add. I don't like it when people prepare answers too much, but if you prepare an idea like what you might want to share, because it's a nonlinear show, and nonlinear thinking is what a lot of people think of polymathic life is, or multidisciplinary, whatever term you want to use. But the way I see it too is that each person has their own pathway, and you have a lot of expertise. You have the technology, you have information architecture, you have this different history, you're an author, you're a content creator, a lot of different areas that you are an expertise of. if you want to go to the rote definition, polymath is someone who's curious, but it's also someone who's an expert in 3 or more areas. If it's just that simple, then you're a polymath. But if it's more polymathic, that's where I kind of see it as like, okay, we're polymathic. That's why you're on the show. That's what you get to share your knowledge and your experiences, and that's what I think.
Yeah. I think the greatest gift I ever got, I think was just being able to live as long as I have. My mind, whether it's here or there, we know it'll go. And my body, it's whether it's here or there, and it's been both places. But I think, I'm most grateful for lately the permission to just age, especially to age as well as I have. It's to be, I look at other people who are in their 50s like I am, and they just don't look well. They don't behave well. They don't care well. They're just not well. And I'm not talking about just physically. They're just not good people. And what type of fucking magic was I given? You know what I mean?
When you said you were 55, I was like, you don't look it.
Yeah, but I was like, what? But how? I didn't try. I'm not that crazy guy who's all over the internet now. He's trying to have the body of an 18-year-old. I can't even think of his name, but you see him everywhere now. He's spending like $2 million a month to look young and be young.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I can't think of his name, but it's just like, but I don't know. Lately I've been thinking, gosh, I am really lucky. My husband's 31, so it's like, you'd never know by looking at the two of us. There was 20 years between us, or more than 20 years. But I keep coming back to like, well, this is what gratitude is. It's not knowing why, but still okay with it.
Gratitude's a big important concept, part of that. And a little tangent I just want to go on real quick. There was this weird experiment that I say weird in a good way, where I need to look it up again so I can make sure I explain it more simply. But essentially, these researchers took 2 bottles of water, and they said very nice and positive things into one bottle of water, and then really negative and nasty things to the other bottle of water. You've probably heard of it. A lot of people have actually at this point. But when you look at the microscopic scale of that first bottle, it's nice and crystalline and beautiful and just good, gorgeous looking. And then you look at the other one, and it's sludgy and gross and just undignified. And the way you kind of explained to people earlier, if you're negative, you're not taking care of your pillars, you kind of drag yourself down more, you have that you're mainly made up of water. So the inside of you is probably more like that second bottle. And for you in particular, Chris, you're Chris 3, like you had a lot of just things happen to you, but you still ended up being a positive person and a positive life for people's lives. And so your body is more positive and crystalline and happy.
Yeah, and it's funny, Dustin. So when I created DareTable, I know we talked about my DareTable, but when I created DareTable, for me, that came about in 2020, and that was just like, I'd done so good with the Airtable and my family and my life and my bills and my values and all that other kind of stuff. I thought, how do I end value hacking? I'll start stealing that. I really had to get into like the emotions behind it, and that's DareTable was really like, oh wow, like I need to get into my emotions. I really need to think about. You talk about gratitude, but like it's so much more than gratitude. Like, intention setting is like something I try to do at the beginning of a day, right? But in the middle of the day, I'll just jump back to my journal from yesterday. So at the start of a day, you'll see a lot of my AI in here. This is my AI writing to me. But like in the beginning of the day, I'll come in here and I'll see it. Like my affirmation was, I am okay right here where I am. But second, in the middle of the day, so I have an afternoon, I have a gratitude. So I have an affirmation in the beginning, and here we go. I have an inspiration in the morning. So what am I inspired by? I have an affirmation in the afternoon, and I have a gratitude at night. And then a reflection after each one. And it wasn't until I started doing those and allowing myself to say these things out loud that I started finding kind of like whole other level. And remember, I also like have a feeling tied into each of these moments during the day. So where am I in, right? And what is my body and what are my minds feeling? And until I had the ability to see that in a greater context as it related to like my actual journal, like what's going on in my life and who am I talking to and why is it working? It just all started clicking, like the values and the data and my family. I was like, oh my gosh, I was literally put here to feel and feel recklessly. And it just was so, gratitude. I've done gratitude journaling and I've done intention setting, but like, man, making a practice around it just so changed when it wasn't just the gratitude, but the feelings that went with gratitude.
Yeah, it kind of actually makes me think of Okay, so when people want to build a body pillar, they'll exercise. If they want to build a mind pillar, they'll learn and maybe meditate. Meditate also helps the spirit pillar. But it almost makes you think like, what do we do for the emotions pillar, right? We learn about, EQ and understanding other people through body language. That's a way to kind of improve it. But I think what you just described there is the exercise that you could do to improve that pillar.
Absolutely. And when at caretable.app, where anyone can get Caretable for free, that's really where in the Caretable system itself, at the end of the day, when you're done logging all these different feelings, I have the ability to, you can link to you can link to your interactions, so your emails, it'll automatically link to any transactions, money you spent that day, any assets. So like if I've got my feelings for this day that we're looking at, July 10th, I know the places I went, I know the organizations I worked with, I know the interactions I had, emails, phone calls, texts, any money I spent, anybody. And then you have an instant record of how your feelings are being influenced by kind of, I even have a health tab. I probably didn't show it, but there's a health button down there too. So like if you have a doctor's appointment, you go for a jog or something, all that information goes in there. So it's pretty easy for me to see now what's influencing my emotions. I knew once I had my values down packed that my emotions would follow because they had a place to go. They just weren't living nebulously. And I was like, why am I angry right now? Oh, I'm angry because I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe because I'm in danger. That's health. Why am I angry right now? Oh, someone just yelled at my husband. That's my family. Oh, you know what I mean? It's like I needed that value section for the feelings to make sense.
It definitely honestly reminds me of a lot of Buddhism concepts as well, and being more present in the moment. And yeah.
That's where, I spent a lot of time at silent retreats in the middle of the last decade. So many 10-day silent retreats. You can't talk to anyone. You can't look at anyone. You meditate all day quietly for days on end.
Ooh. Sounds brutal, but in a good way. I definitely also, you said something about when you were younger, you spent a lot of time looking at philosophy and different religions.
I still don't get it. Like, why?
Hey, but I was similar too. I actually, from a young age, I was a little bit older, probably teenager, but one of my favorite memories growing up was back when I was in high school, junior year. I, in a matter of like 3 months, just went through the entire philosophy and world religion section of my school's library. Just burned through all those books. I was just voraciously reading and curious. And I learned more from that than I did the entire teacher from all the other schooling stuff. It was crazy.
One of the first philosophy books I ever read was in the early 80s. I was, again, probably 8 or 9. It was a book called The Road Less Traveled. Old book on kind of mental models. Do you have The Road Less Traveled?
I think I've seen it at the very least. I thought I had
it. It's an old book, yeah. But I think one of the first line of the book, I remember opening up in the books, and the first line is "Life is hard," and I thought to myself, "Okay, no one ever told me this." Like now it's pretty common. Everyone talks about that, but like back then, it was like you should be happy. Like no, you should be feeling, but you shouldn't be happy.
Happiness comes from a different source.
Yeah.
So. Other than that, I think I just have one more question for you today. I'm going to skip some of these questions. We can always go back through them on another day. But, yeah.
I didn't rehearse.
What led you to writing Don't Unplug, or formerly known as I Am You Tomorrow?
I was so surprised you knew that there was another name on it. Well, this is the original one that no one ever gets to see. The hard copy is called Don't Unplug. Well, I was paid a lot of money.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
6-figure book deals are hard to come by. When I got the book deal, and you don't know what the book's going to be. They're just told, someone's going to pay you to write a book. Then you think, okay, it's got to be a #1 bestseller. It's got to be this, or it's got to be that. And your question is, what led you to write it? The motivating factor for every single thing. And the interesting thing about the book, there's a book within a book that some people have read the book and then reread it and then found the second book and then write to me, and it blows my mind when people go back and I'm like, yeah. There's actually a page between the pages. But there's a lot of data in Don't Unplug. I've never talked about this. I should have said it's the one thing no one knows. But the one thing that was the catalyst for me writing that book was I said to my publisher, I said, I don't even know where to start. Like, do I write like the crazy stories about my parents? Do I write like how I dealt with that as a kid? Do I write like the first time I had this idea of like, how do I collect data? Do I write these data models? Like, what do I do? There's a lot here. She said, Chris, nobody wants to know what you know. They want to know how you think. And I said, what? Just no one cares about what you know. Doesn't matter. But they will, if they want to know you, they want to know how you think. Yes, you were homeless, but how did you think about that? you know? Not how did you respond to it? How did you think about it? How do you think about that? If you have a new problem, your first question on one of your earliest questions to me today was, how you see information, and I said pictures. That blew my mind. And I thought to myself, oh, wow, I've been doing life so wrong for so long. I'm always telling people what I know. And if you go back and rewatch or re-listen to this interview, I never told you anything I knew. I told you how I thought about it all. It fundamentally changed that book, and it changed the way I deal with myself and other people, because how you think is who you are. And if you can be who you are and you seem authentic to people, that feeling of authenticity is not them, it's their thinking. And people who are constructing thinking are not being authentic. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with until you can ride with no arms on your mental bicycle, right? There's nothing wrong with, but you're still riding your bicycle, so don't delegitimize it. But you'll know, and you always know, even if you're flowed into authenticity, when you're in total mind mode, that's who you are. And that's what really inspired me. I was like, how do I be my most authentic self in a way that transcends not only this book, the second book in it, but kind of it'll reshape how I communicate for the rest of time.
One thing that made me think of that is I taught some lessons for a decade, and how I communicate that information to people. It's not about the actual knowledge itself. It's how to communicate it and how to think about it, whether it's the why or the how or the what. Yeah. And I love the answer you gave us there, Chris. So thank you. And that's why I actually had it at the end there, because I thought that would be a perfect segue to the outro.
I forgot that was the last question, so it was fun.
It's good. And again, I often jump around too. Like we jumped around a lot today. Honestly, I kind of felt like this was too many questions, because I knew for a fact you and I would definitely go on tangents, and we did, and it was beautiful. And so, obviously, as one of the most connected people on the planet, people can find you in a lot of different places. But where can people find you online?
So you can, I give good search. So if you're one of these people who wants to just binge Chris Dancy, there's enough of me out there. My website, you can contact me. There's like a contact form on Twitter, but I'm really evil on Twitter. I'm just ranty and horrible on Twitter, just because I don't care. I don't care if I have 100 followers or none. I just want someplace where I can yell at the world. What I always tell people, and I end a lot of videos this way, is my phone number. My actual phone number is on my website. I get phone numbers. I get phone calls. I got 2 today while we were in this meeting from people I do not know who see an interview or hear from me, and they'll call up and say, I just watched this and I'm scared. Or I just watched that and you blew my mind. Or I just watched that. I prefer phone calls. So if you're someone who can handle a phone, you can also text. But if you're someone who can handle a phone call, just call. You can. You don't have to find me online. I will pick up the phone if I'm not in an interview or doing something important and talk to you, because at the end of the day, what I really care about is every single person feeling connected to something. And if I can be that something for you, call.
I love that. And I guess it's a great call to action as well for people to do. Do you have any idea what would be a good call to growth for people to do today?
Cry.
Yeah.
Find a reason to make yourself cry and really lean into it. I wasn't expecting to get emotional talking about my mom today. It felt so good. My whole mood is lifted after that.
I'm so happy for that. I'm happy that you were able to feel comfortable enough in the show to express that. I'm happy that you were able to get that feeling out too. Expressing emotions is definitely a hard thing to do sometimes, and so I'm grateful to you.
You want to tell the story, but you don't want to fall apart, Yeah. So it's but yeah, I'm just so I have the best damn mom.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Well, once again, this is Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator, and Chris Dancy on the Polymath Polycast. Thank you for being here.
Bye.
Innovators crave innovative products, which is exactly why the Polymath Polycast is powered by Riverside.fm. With Riverside, you can achieve studio quality without the need for an actual studio. You'll get uncompressed audio and up to 4K video from the comfort of your own home. All recordings are done locally, which means that you and your guests will get the highest quality possible, even with unreliable internet. Hi, I'm Kendall from Riverside, and do yourself a favor and upgrade from cloud-based softwares like Skype, Zoom, or Hangouts. Try out Riverside today and use the link in the show notes, because your groundbreaking content deserves to look and sound its very best.